What programming language should you actually learn? I've seen a couple of questions about this just in the last couple of days. What programming language should I learn? Should I learn this language or that language? What will be useful? What should I start with? Okay, I'm going to answer that in this video. I'm going to specifically answer it from the perspective of you want to learn programming. Now, I think programming is awesome. I'm not going to frame this as you want to get into a scale tech, FANG tech career. That's a different. You can go there later. This is just you want to learn how to program a computer, write programs, write tools, do this. I think it's really amazingly fun. I don't think it's just for people going into tech careers either. I think the ability to have a small tool that you can build that will do something for you is amazing, but more on that later. Okay, let me answer that question for you because it's a bit tricky, but there's one really overarching thing that is going to make it fun and useful to you if you pursue it. Okay, so lots of different languages. They come in many different types. There's old-fashioned, new-fashioned, lots of fancy new things. There's Rust, there's Haskell, there's blah. Ignore most of the hype. You want one thing from a language that you learn, and that is it can do stuff for you that you care about, that you want to do, that's going to be useful to you. So there are two major families of languages. One is called an interpreted language, and that's where the computer directly interprets the language words and does something from it. The nice thing about an interpreted language is you can often just type individual lines into what's called a REPL loop, and it will execute those lines or do the thing or run the function and get right back to you, and you can see what happens. This is awesome for learning. The other major type of programming language is called a compiled language. That's where you have code. A program called a compiler turns that human readable code into machine readable code, and then you run that on a computer. Modern compilers can be super quick. That loop can happen quite quickly, but it's harder to get started because you can't just run one line. You need a complete program that turns into a little executable file that you can then run. There's some halfway houses. Java's a bit of a sort of middly-widdly case. It's more like a compiled language than anything else, kind of. Okay, so if you're starting out, what I'm going to say is it depends on what you want to do. If what you want to do is make little widgets on a web page so you can interact with those, then a really good language to learn, well, an okay language to learn is JavaScript, because you can write little JavaScript snippets right into a web page, start to interact with them, do cool stuff, and then you can write a widget that does something for you. That's awesome. If you want to write slightly larger tools, like you want to operate on a file or read something in or read data or scrape things off the web, or I don't know, build a thing that goes and scrapes the local weather station for what the temperature is and then draws a graph on your monitor in little colors so you can watch the temperature during the day. I have done this. I've done this multiple times. I think it's great. I'm a weather nerd. You can do this most likely with a language like Python. I think Python is a great starting language. It has nice-ish syntax to get started, not too complicated, lots of nice data structures built in. It's relatively modern, lots of libraries to do all the things, cool AI bits if you want. That's totally a thing Python has. But it has mostly the ability to run Python as a little language and type in one line of code, and it will do that. You can type in your program one line at a time and just play with it and just see how things work and go, what if I did this to an array? What if I wanted to see all the things I could operate on this variable? Python will literally say, oh, that's all the things you can do. Dir of this object. Here's all the methods. Here's what you can do. It's got built-in help for all of those. It's great, except at scale. If you're writing a very large software system that hundreds or thousands of people will actually contribute to, you shouldn't do that in Python. But also, you shouldn't be watching this video. So go away and watch one of the other videos. They're much better for you. If you're starting out, I think Python is grand. I came to Python as my, I don't know, 8th, 9th language. And for me, it mostly replaced Perl. I got very, very sick of Perl because reading other people's Perl code was awful, and I mostly switched to Python. But I also don't use Python for things over a couple of hundred lines. If you are starting out, a couple of hundred lines of code is unimaginably complex. You don't care. This is way out in the borders. You can write cool programs. Python would be a good choice to scrape the web, operate on text data, operate on database things, munge data around, write little tools, right? There are also C if you're doing microcontroller stuff. There would be C++ if you really want to get into a crazy pants thing. Don't start that, it's terrible. Lots of universities use Java. Java is awkward. You have to do quite a lot of additional boilerplate fluff to get even a basic program working. That's why I would not actually recommend it as a first language unless you're working in a university setting where people are going to give you a bunch of the bootstrap framework, get stuff going, a bunch of structured assignments to start working on that. You can write tools with it. You can write tools with Python. So Python, JavaScript. Rust is very fancy. Lots of people think of it as a cool system programming. Go, I think, is an excellent language for systems work, for a lot of sysadmin, SRE, other things. Cool. Use that if you like. Lisp, I think, is amazing. It's also very old-fashioned, and you mostly won't use it unless you use Emacs these days, or maybe AutoCAD. It's a bit niche. JavaScript, Python. Honestly, one of those two to start with. And the thing you have to do to make this useful to you is not learn lots of detailed algorithms and all the computer science stuff. I think that's cool. I think that's useful. I think you should do that next. The thing you have to do when learning a language more than anything else is get to the point where you've learnt enough where it can solve a problem for you. You've got, oh, I wish I had a way of fetching the weather, renaming a bunch of files all at once. I wish I had a way of processing this list of things so I could work out what the maximums were, adding the scores up, reverse engineering the CRC code so I could make up fake student numbers for my university. It doesn't matter what it is. Don't just do one, do lots of them. The more you can play with a language and start to understand it and then kind of go, oh, I don't know how to do this. I have to go and look up the documentation to find out the library to do this and figure out how to do that. The more you write little things and get experience, the better you'll get at this whole software thing, and the more fulfilling it's going to be for you. But here's the thing. This is not just for tech. If you're an engineer, if you're a scientist, if you work in an office, if you deal with data, if you care about the weather, if you want to build something that can twiddle the remote control lights in your house, all of those are things you can do if you start to learn a little bit of programming to the point where you can build little tools for yourself. That is not a high threshold. That is why you pick a language that mostly doesn't get in your way, and then you just go and do stuff. Just go and build it. And then maybe you or someone around you will be inspired by going, wow, I really love this. I want to spend a lot more time looking about the details of that. And that might be where you go and do computer science or a tech career or various other things. But don't do it just for that. This is not a money play. This is I can build cool little tools. And to me, as an engineer, building cool little tools is what it's pretty much all about. I love building cool little tools. That's a modular synthesizer back there. That's a 3D printer I use to make things. I'll make a video about how I made stuff, custom storage things for bits and pieces around there, just because making things is interesting and solving problems is interesting, and programming is one of the easiest ways to be able to build almost anything today. Things that used to be done with quite complicated electronics are now done by a programmable computer and a very small amount of electronics that maybe you can just buy. This is, I think, great. This is hugely democratizing. This makes it easier. This makes it more fun. So I'd recommend Python or JavaScript. If you really care, you should learn multiple languages, but those are both excellent places to start. Look at the online tutorials, just fiddle, but more than anything else, just build something. Build a solution to a problem you have, and then sit back and go, I made a thing. That's where you start, and it all goes from there.